Hey folks, thanks for tuning into Lefty's Guns. Today we're going to take a moment to talk about America's sweetheart, the 1911. It's big, bold, beautiful, and battle-tested. It's been around a long time, but is it still a top contender in today's diverse firearms market? Stay tuned. The U.S. Army model of 1911 was designed by John Moses Browning. In the world of modern firearms design, Browning practically walks as a god amongst men. He's one of the most popular and most prolific and debatably one of the most successful firearms inventors ever. And many would even assert that the model of 1911 is Browning's crowning achievement. The 1911 is the longest serving military handgun. It served the U.S. Armed Forces from 1911 all the way up until 1980. There are many that believe that this is one of the best handguns simply because of its incredible popularity and its incredible success. Now, before we can really talk about whether I would recommend this gun or whether it's competitive with a lot of today's handguns or even where this handgun excels, we first need to talk about context. Any recommendation without context is kind of useless. It's entirely subjective and it doesn't actually take you anywhere. So if you fell in love with the design of the 1911 simply because you love the way it looks or you love the way it feels or you love the history behind it, that's not really what I'm going to be answering in this video. I'm not going to be able to logic a person into or out of a position that they didn't use logic to originally get into. Similarly, if you have a girl that you've got the hots for, I'm not going to be able to give you a objective analysis to determine whether you should make a move. So if you are in love with the 1911 purely for emotional reasons, that's your own thing. Today we're going to talk about recommendations in terms of practicality, reliability, and all the things I normally talk about. Our first context of use is just going to be a range gun. Just a gun to go have fun with, to go shoot with buddies, to take out, shoot some steel or shoot some paper, just to have fun with. For that, I think the 1911 is an excellent choice. It's fun, it's extremely accurate, it's reliable, and just the feeling of shooting a 1911 is like none other. The feeling of having that .45 automatic Colt pistol just go boom in your hands repetitively is like none other. And this is an incredible gun just to take to the range. And there's a fantastic community for the 1911 too. You'll immediately pull it out and be met with somebody else who also has one. And you can talk about mods, you can talk about gear, you can talk about upgrades. There's all kind of fun things to do with the 1911. And you can really kind of take the pistol and make it your own. And that's where I see a lot of people adopting 1911s. The first step is buying one. The much bigger and secondary step is making it your own. Many people use it as a tool of self-expression more than a self-defense or combat handgun. They use it to personalize and really make their own. So for just taking out to the range, just to have fun with, go for it, buy one. It's great if that's all you want to use it for. Similarly, let's talk about competition. The 1911 is also a very common competition handgun. It's used because it's been a standard for a long time. It started out as a very accurate handgun, which is a big step forward in the competition world. But it's also been used for so long that it allows itself to be very easily standardized, and you can easily compare a 1911 and a whole class of shooters. It's very accurate, it's very reliable, it's a great competition gun. You'll see guys building all these crazy modded out race guns with red dots and all kinds of accessories, and you can do that with a 1911 just as well as anything else, or you can keep it plain Jane, simple in its original World War I or World War II configuration. So for competition, it's a great choice. It's a great standard. Now let's talk defensive use. There are many different ways you could use a handgun defensively. So we're going to outline kind of 3 different venues in which that could take place. Number 1, your home defense handgun, just for protecting yourself against the thing that goes bump in the night, just to keep either by your bedside table or somewhere in the home. Number 2, open carry. A handgun that you wear on your side, openly carried out in public, or when you're out working on maybe your ranch, or you're just walking around town. And number 3, the concealed carry handgun. So we're going to address defense from those three topics. First venue of defense is home defense. So would I recommend the 1911 for home defense? Well, kind of. If you don't have a home defense weapon and you're looking at picking one up, sure, I would recommend it. 1911 is better than not having a weapon. But is it my go-to for a home defense weapon? Probably not. Now, a lot of people are really attracted to the 1911 for a home defense type gun because it's very comfortable to hold, it is very easy to aim, it's an accurate handgun, and it's a pretty reliable handgun. Actually, it's a very reliable handgun. The things that I don't like about it for home defense use is it is single action only, which means you have to keep the hammer cocked and then you lock the safety. Now, a lot of home defense people will say, oh no, you can rack the slide or you can cock it, but really the fewer steps between you and using a gun when you need a gun, the better. So that immediately detracts from it a little bit. And also firepower. Most 1911s either hold 7+1 or 8+1. Now, the likelihood that you're gonna need more rounds than 7 or 8 or 9 rounds is not very likely, in all honesty. But likewise, having more rounds is better. I would much rather have rounds and not need them than need rounds that I don't have, or have to go fumbling for a magazine when I could have gotten away with a gun where I didn't have to reload. So for home defense, iffy. And also, let's address the battery of arms for a 1911. If you're gonna use it for any defensive scenario, whether it's home defense or the other two that I'm gonna talk about, train with the 1911. Be used to this battery of arms, be familiar with it. Because for a left-handed shooter, I really wouldn't recommend this gun for any other purposes than a range toy, as I talked about earlier. Just because there's not a left-handed safety naturally, slide release is on the wrong side, mag release is on the wrong side, and you're gonna say, wait, but you can get all these things aftermarket. Yeah, sure you can. Or you can buy real fancy designer 1911s, like Cabot Arms makes a beautiful 1911. They call it the Southpaw, that has everything set up immaculately on the right-hand side for a left-handed shooter. And that works fantastic. But if you're gonna throw down that much money, we're not really talking about an original 1911 design to begin with. Or if you're gonna customize it yourself, a lot of times those at-home gunsmith customizations really decrease the reliability of a handgun. I've seen a lot of guns that were fine in their stock configuration, then somebody started fiddling with it and yeah, it mostly works, but it's still not as reliable as you would want for home defense. So would I recommend it for home defense? Maybe. It's better than nothing. It's a good gun to have for self-defense, but I wouldn't necessarily recommend it over a modern polymer framed handgun like a Glock or a Smith & Wesson or an XD or something like that. Now let's talk about our second kind of venue of defense, and that is open carry. Now the 1911 is very big and very bulky and actually was originally designed for open carry. If you think about it, this was a combat handgun. It was worn by soldiers and officers in World War I and mostly in World War II. So this handgun was designed to be carried openly. It does shoot very accurately, but it is bulky. So if you're gonna carry this, would I recommend it for open carry? Again, maybe. Very similar to home defense. Now, be familiar with the battery of arms because you are gonna have to carry this thing cocked and locked. See if you can see that there. And some people are immediately made uncomfortable just by the sight of seeing a gun with the hammer back. A lot of people are used to it. A lot of people say, oh, that's a 1911. I understand, I don't mind. But just the sight of that, or just the feeling of seeing that on there, can make some people uncomfortable. And I think that's important to address because the whole purpose of open carry is for people to see that you're armed. It's not, yeah, it's good to have a gun to fight back, but actually seeing a gun is what really discourages crime to begin with. So being concerned with the way people see your gun actually is important to take into consideration. So you're gonna have to carry it cocked and locked, and please don't say, oh, I'll carry it without a round in the chamber, because any gun without a round in the chamber, you might as well be carrying a rock, because that puts several steps between you and actually being able to use that gun. So for a left-handed open carrier, I would say no way. Again, unless you have something like that Cabot Arms or some really fancy lefty specific 1911. But for most 1911s, I would say no, just because using that safety is extremely difficult. I'm reaching all the way over the top of the beaver tail to do that, and that's just horribly uncomfortable. So for a lefty, no. For a righty, maybe. Now let's talk our third venue of defense, concealed carry. Would I recommend a 1911 for concealed carry? Absolutely not. This thing is massive. It's probably taller than my head. It is a very heavy, very bulky handgun, and again, you still only get 7+1 or 8+1 rounds. There are many smaller options that give you more firepower. Now, they make some compact 911s that are better. They reduce the overall size and weight, but they still are limited on firepower. There are a lot of kind of 1911 styled designs that aren't actually 1911s, but really harken back to the original 1911 design. The SIG 938 is a great example. It's a 9mm, but it uses a design very similar to the original 1911. Many people use that as a concealed carry handgun, and it is a fantastic option. But an actual 1911 for concealed carry, it's way too big, it's way too bulky, and I would recommend something with more firepower. Now we've talked about a few different reasons why an individual might want to use a 1911. We talked about using it as a fun range toy just to go planking or shooting with. We talked about it as a competition gun, and we talked about it for defense, either in the home, outside the home, carried openly, or carried concealed. Now let's talk a little bit about training and just shooting the 1911 in general. I had a friend who was new to firearms, had never shot a gun before in her life. A friend took her out to the range and she shot a small little .380 and she shot a .45. It was a 1911. She was very hesitant about shooting. She wasn't really comfortable with handguns, had never shot a handgun before in her life, and somebody took her to the range and gave her a 1911 to shoot. Because of that, she is now very hesitant about shooting guns in general. The 1911 is not a beginner's gun. It's not a gun that you should just hand somebody and expect them to be immediately comfortable with. Now, it was designed to just hand soldiers originally. A lot of those were actually officers, not just your everyday private necessarily got one. But they also didn't have a choice. If you're introducing somebody to shooting sports, this is a horrible choice for a beginner. The recoil and the size and the weight can be really intimidating, and just don't create a comfortable atmosphere for a new shooter. So if you have a 1911 and you want to take somebody who's new to shooting, please borrow a gun from a friend or rent a gun at the range, because this is really not a good introductory option. Now, that being said about beginning shooters, I do think it is a fun gun to shoot for intermediate or advanced level shooters. And I had this 1911, and as I discussed with the battery of arms, it's not left-handed friendly at all. But why do I own it, being a lefty? Well, I kind of just had to have one. They are so classic, and I love the look of them. And I'm not sure if I'm going to keep this or if I'm going to trade it, or if I'm going to attempt to customize it to make it more lefty friendly. Maybe I'll do an update about that in the future, we'll see. But they are not necessarily a good choice for a left-handed shooter. So in conclusion, would I recommend a 1911? For competition, yes. For taking out to the range just to have fun, yes. To defend your life, find something better. That's Lefty's Gun, signing out.